Judge Richardson, we need to talk about my case.
Officer Bennett, you cannot be here. This is inappropriate.
You think you can destroy my career? You have no idea who you're dealing with.
Are you threatening me?
I'm promising you.
August 15th, 2024, 9:47 p.m. Officer Marcus Bennett stood on the front porch of a home in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. Expensive suburb, professional families, the kind of place where people feel safe. He wasn't there on police business, wasn't in uniform, wasn't responding to a call. He was there to threaten a judge, at her home, at night. And he had no idea that every word, every gesture, every threat was being recorded by a doorbell camera. What Officer Bennett didn't know was that the woman he was threatening, Judge Patricia Richardson, was about to use that footage to end his career and send him to prison for 17 years. This is the story of how a corrupt cop's arrogance, a Ring doorbell camera, and one brave judge brought down a man who thought he was untouchable. Let's begin. Officer Marcus Bennett, 42 years old, 15 years with the Metro City Police Department, decorated officer, multiple commendations, respected by his peers, or so everyone thought. Because Marcus Bennett had a secret. He was dirty, corrupt, and he'd been getting away with it for years. Bennett worked narcotics, drug busts, search warrants, evidence seizures. Perfect position for a corrupt cop. Access to drugs, access to money, access to evidence rooms. And Bennett took advantage of every opportunity. Over the course of 5 years, Bennett had been skimming, taking drugs from busts, pocketing cash during raids, planting evidence on suspects to justify arrests. He'd built a system, a network, other dirty cops, criminal informants, street dealers who paid him protection money. Bennett was making 6 figures on the side, tax-free, untraceable, or so he thought. But eventually, Internal Affairs got a tip, an anonymous call, someone who'd seen too much, known too much, decided to talk. IA opened an investigation, quietly, carefully. They watched Bennett, tracked his movements, documented inconsistencies, and they built a case. Evidence tampering, theft, corruption, abuse of power. The case was assigned to Judge Patricia Richardson. Judge Richardson, 54 years old, 22 years on the bench, known for being tough, fair, uncompromising. She didn't care if you were a cop or a criminal. If you broke the law, you faced consequences. She'd sent plenty of police officers to prison before, bad cops who thought the badge put them above the law. She proved them wrong. When the Bennett case landed on her desk, she reviewed the evidence carefully. Wiretaps, surveillance footage, financial records, witness testimony. It was overwhelming, damning, undeniable. Bennett was dirty, and the evidence proved it. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for August 20th, 5 days away. Bennett's attorney tried to get the case dismissed, argued the evidence was obtained improperly, that IA had overstepped. Judge Richardson denied every motion. The evidence was solid. The case would proceed. And that's when Bennett made the worst decision of his life. He decided to threaten the judge, intimidate her, make her drop the case. On August 15th, 5 days before the hearing, Bennett drove to Judge Richardson's home. He knew where she lived. It wasn't hard to find. Public record, property taxes, a little research. He showed up at 9:47 p.m., after dark, when most neighbors would be inside, when he thought nobody would see. He rang the doorbell. Judge Richardson was in her study, reviewing case files. She heard the bell, checked the Ring camera app on her phone, saw Officer Bennett on her porch, out of uniform, looking agitated. Her first thought, this is inappropriate. Officers under investigation shouldn't be at a judge's home, especially not at night. Her second thought, this could be dangerous. But Patricia Richardson wasn't someone who scared easily. She'd faced down threats before, death threats, intimidation attempts, angry defendants. She walked to the door, didn't open it fully, kept the chain lock engaged. "Officer Bennett," she said calmly, "You cannot be here. This is highly inappropriate. You need to leave immediately." Bennett's face was tight, angry. He'd been drinking, she could smell it. "We need to talk," Bennett said, "about my case." "There's nothing to discuss. You have an attorney. All communication goes through proper channels. Leave, now." Bennett stepped closer, aggressive, threatening. "You're making a mistake, Judge. You don't know who you're dealing with." Judge Richardson's hand moved to her phone, ready to call 911 if necessary. "Officer Bennett, you're drunk, you're at my home uninvited, and you're threatening a sitting judge. Leave before I have you arrested." Bennett laughed, bitter, mocking. "Arrested? Who? My buddies on the force? You think they're going to arrest me for talking to you?" He leaned in, voice low, menacing. "You think that evidence is going to stick? You think those charges are going to stand? I have friends, Judge, people who owe me, people who'll make problems disappear." Judge Richardson's expression didn't change, stone-faced, calm. "Are you threatening me, Officer Bennett?" "I'm promising you. Drop this case, make it go away, or you're going to regret it." His hand moved to his waistband, where his concealed weapon usually sat. Even off-duty, Bennett carried. Judge Richardson saw the movement, understood the implication. "You need to leave, right now." Bennett stared at her, long moment, testing her, seeing if she'd break. She didn't. Finally, Bennett stepped back, smiled, cold, threatening. "Think about what I said, Judge. Think real carefully about your next move." He walked off the porch, got in his car, drove away. Judge Richardson closed the door, locked it, leaned against it. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. She'd been a judge for 22 years, and in all that time, nobody had ever threatened her at her own home. She pulled out her phone, opened the Ring app, downloaded the doorbell footage, watched it 3 times, Bennett's face, his words, his hand moving to his waistband, all recorded, time-stamped, saved to the cloud. And then Judge Richardson made a decision. She wasn't dropping the case, she was expanding it. The next morning, she filed a formal complaint with the district attorney, witness intimidation, threats against a judicial officer, attempted obstruction of justice, and she attached the doorbell camera footage. Crystal clear, undeniable, Bennett threatening a judge on her doorstep, on camera, on her doorstep. The DA watched the footage, once, that's all it took. "We're adding charges," the DA said. "This idiot just handed us a felony on a silver platter." Bennett was arrested 48 hours later, at his home, in front of his neighbors, charged with corruption, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and threatening a judicial officer. The doorbell footage went viral within days. Local news picked it up, then national outlets. "Corrupt cop threatens judge on doorbell camera." The video showed everything: Bennett's aggression, his threats, his hand moving to his weapon, and it destroyed any chance he had at fighting the original charges, because now everyone could see what kind of cop Marcus Bennett really was: a corrupt bully who thought he was above the law. The trial was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. The doorbell footage was the final nail in the coffin. Bennett's attorney tried to argue entrapment, tried to claim the footage was edited, tried everything. The jury didn't buy it. Took them 90 minutes to convict on all counts. Sentencing was 3 weeks later. Judge Patricia Richardson wasn't allowed to preside. Conflict of interest. She was the victim. But she sat in the gallery, watched as another judge sentenced Officer Marcus Bennett. 17 years. Federal prison. No parole eligibility for 14 years. Bennett's face when he heard the sentence was shock, disbelief, reality crashing down. He thought he was untouchable, thought his badge protected him, thought he could intimidate a judge and walk away. He was wrong, and a $20 doorbell camera proved it.
Let's talk about what happened after that doorbell footage was filed with the district attorney. Because Bennett's threat to Judge Richardson wasn't just stupid, it opened a floodgate. Once the DA had evidence of witness intimidation, they had justification to dig deeper into Bennett's entire career. And what they found was worse than anyone expected. The internal affairs investigation had focused on the past 2 years, evidence tampering, skimming drugs and cash. But with Bennett now facing serious charges, witnesses started coming forward, people who'd been too afraid to talk before. Informants Bennett had threatened, suspects he'd planted evidence on, fellow officers who'd seen him cross the line but stayed quiet. Fear keeps people silent, but once a dirty cop is facing real consequences, that fear evaporates. People want to talk. They want justice. They want to make sure he goes down. The first witness was Carlos Martinez, a street-level dealer Bennett had arrested 3 years earlier. Carlos claimed Bennett had planted cocaine in his car during a traffic stop. Bennett found 2 ounces, enough for a distribution charge. Carlos insisted it wasn't his, said Bennett pulled it out of his own pocket and dropped it on the seat. Nobody believed him. He was a known dealer. Bennett was a decorated cop. Carlos went to prison for 4 years. But now, with Bennett's corruption exposed, Carlos's public defender filed for a new trial, presented evidence of Bennett's pattern of misconduct. The DA reviewed the case, and they realized Carlos might have been telling the truth. They vacated his conviction, released him, apologized. 1 case, but how many more? The DA's office started reviewing every single arrest Bennett had made in 15 years. Over 300 cases, hundreds of convictions, and they all had to be examined for potential corruption. It was a nightmare. Defense attorneys were lining up, filing motions, demanding retrials. The system Bennett had corrupted was now collapsing, case by case, and that all started with a doorbell camera. Then came Officer Lisa Chang, Bennett's former partner, 7 years riding together. She'd seen things, known things, but never reported them. Why? Because reporting a fellow officer is career suicide in most departments. You're labeled a rat, ostracized, forced out. But now, with Bennett facing 17 years, Chang decided to talk. She testified before a grand jury, described incidents she'd witnessed, Bennett taking cash during raids, pocketing drugs, threatening suspects into silence. "I should have reported it," Chang said, her voice breaking. "I know that now, but I was scared of retaliation, scared of losing my job." She'd made a choice, self-preservation over justice, and she'd have to live with that. But at least now she was telling the truth. Her testimony was devastating, corroborated the IA investigation, gave prosecutors dozens of new leads. Chang faced her own consequences, suspended without pay, eventually resigned rather than face termination. She'd enabled Bennett's corruption by staying silent, and that came with a price. But her testimony helped build an airtight case, multiple counts, multiple victims, a pattern of corruption spanning years. All because Marcus Bennett thought he could threaten a judge and get away with it. The trial began in November, 3 months after the doorbell incident. Bennett's attorney was Gerald Hartman, expensive, aggressive, known for defending dirty cops. Hartman's strategy: attack the evidence, claim the IA investigation was biased, argue that Bennett was being railroaded. But he had a problem: the doorbell footage. You can spin a lot of things in court, claim misunderstandings, argue context, but you can't explain away a video of your client threatening a judge. Hartman tried. Oh, he tried. "My client was emotional. He'd been drinking. He made a terrible mistake in going to Judge Richardson's home, but his words were taken out of context. He wasn't threatening her. He was pleading, asking her to see his side." DA Kim played the video for the jury. Bennett's face, aggressive, angry, finger-pointing. "You think that evidence is going to stick? I have friends, people who'll make problems disappear. Drop this case or you're going to regret it." His hand moving to his waistband. DA Kim paused the video, let the jury sit with that image. "Does that look like pleading to you, or does that look like a threat?" She didn't wait for an answer. She played it again, from a different angle, enhanced audio. Every word clear, every threat unmistakable. Hartman tried to recover, called character witnesses, fellow officers who testified Bennett was a good cop, a family man, someone who'd served the community. But the prosecution countered with victims, people Bennett had framed, robbed, intimidated. Like Tyrell Jackson, arrested by Bennett 4 years ago, convicted of drug possession. Tyrell swore Bennett had planted the drugs. Nobody believed him, until the IA investigation found Bennett's fingerprints on the evidence bag, not just on the outside, on the inside, where only the person who packaged the drugs should have touched. Bennett had handled the drugs before they were supposedly found on Tyrell, planted them, then supposedly discovered them during the arrest. Tyrell spent 3 years in prison for drugs that weren't his. He testified, looked Bennett in the eye, told the jury what that false conviction had cost him. His job, his apartment, his relationship with his daughter. He destroyed my life, Tyrell said quietly, because he could, because he had a badge and I didn't, and nobody would believe me. The jury believed him now. One by one, victims testified. A pattern emerged. Bennett targeted people he thought couldn't fight back, people with records, people without resources. He'd been doing it for years and getting away with it, until Judge Richardson's doorbell camera caught him making a mistake. The defense had no answer to the mountain of evidence, no explanation for the witness testimony, no way to spin the video. Hartman's closing argument was desperate, asked for leniency, reminded the jury that Bennett had once been a good cop, that he had a family. D.A. Kim's closing was brutal. Officer Bennett wore a badge, swore an oath, promised to uphold the law. Instead, he corrupted it. He framed innocent people. He stole. He threatened. He thought he was above accountability. She pointed at the defense table, at Bennett, sitting stone-faced. And when he was finally caught, when a judge was brave enough to hold him accountable, he went to her home at night and threatened her on camera. She paused, let that sink in. This wasn't one bad decision. This was 15 years of corruption, 15 years of abuse, 15 years of betraying everything that badge is supposed to represent. And the only reason we know the full extent of his crimes is because a $20 doorbell camera recorded him threatening a judge. She looked at the jury. Find him guilty on every count. Send the message that nobody is above the law, not even the people sworn to enforce it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, came back with a verdict. Guilty on all 23 counts. Corruption, evidence tampering, theft, witness intimidation, threatening a judicial officer. All of it, every charge, unanimous. Bennett's face when the verdict was read was blank, numb. The reality hadn't hit him yet. But it would, in about 3 weeks, at sentencing.
Sentencing day, November 22nd. The courtroom was packed. Victims, media, fellow officers. Judge Richardson sat in the front row. Bennett wore a suit. His attorney had told him to look respectable, professional, remorseful. But you can't fake remorse when you've spent 15 years being a corrupt bully. The sentencing judge was Honorable Michael Torres, federal judge, known for tough sentences on police corruption. He'd read the case file, watched the doorbell footage, heard the testimony, and he was not in a forgiving mood. Before announcing the sentence, Judge Torres allowed victim impact statements. Tyrell Jackson went first, the man who'd been framed, spent 3 years in prison. "I lost everything because of him," Tyrell said, his voice steady but filled with pain. "My daughter was 6 when I went to prison. She's 9 now. Those years are gone. I can't get them back." He looked at Bennett. "You did that, not because I committed a crime, but because you needed an arrest, needed to look good, and I was convenient." Carlos Martinez spoke next, another victim of planted evidence. "I served 4 years for drugs that weren't mine, 4 years away from my family, 4 years in hell, because you're a coward who hides behind a badge." One by one, victims spoke, each story more damning than the last. Bennett didn't look at them, stared at the table, jaw clenched. Then Judge Richardson was invited to speak. She stood, composed, dignified. "On your honor, on August 15th, Officer Bennett came to my home. He threatened me, attempted to intimidate me into dropping his case. He believed his badge gave him the right to corrupt the justice system." She paused. "But the justice system doesn't bend to threats, it doesn't bow to intimidation, and it certainly doesn't allow corrupt officers to escape accountability." She looked at Bennett. "You thought you could scare me. You were wrong. And now you're going to face the consequences of every crime you've committed, every life you've ruined, every oath you've broken." She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Torres reviewed the sentencing guidelines. Multiple felony convictions, abuse of authority, no remorse shown during trial. Bennett's attorney made a final plea for leniency, mentioned Bennett's years of service, his family, asked for mercy. Judge Torres listened, then spoke. "Officer Bennett, you violated the public trust in the most egregious way possible. You used your badge to commit crimes. You framed innocent people. You stole. You corrupted evidence. And when you were caught, you threatened a sitting judge." He paused. "The law is clear. The guidelines are clear. And your conduct demands the maximum penalty." Bennett's hands gripped the table. "On the corruption charges, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison." Bennett's attorney exhaled slightly. 8 years, not great, but not the worst. Judge Torres continued. "On the evidence tampering charges, an additional 5 years to run consecutively. 13 years total. And on the charge of threatening a judicial officer, an additional 4 years, also consecutive." Bennett's face went pale. "Total sentence, 17 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 14 years, followed by 5 years supervised release." The gavel came down. 17 years. Bennett's legs nearly gave out. His attorney caught his arm, steadied him. 17 years. He'd be nearly 60 when he got out. His career over. His life shattered. All because he thought he could threaten a judge. All because a doorbell camera was recording. $20, Amazon Prime, installed in 15 minutes. That's what exposed 15 years of corruption. Not internal affairs, not a whistleblower, not a heroic investigation. A Ring doorbell, recording everything. Judge Patricia Richardson gave one interview after the sentencing to a local news station. "Technology is changing accountability," she said. "Body cameras, doorbell cameras, dash cams, surveillance footage, the truth is being recorded constantly. And for people who abuse power, who think they can threaten and intimidate without consequences, that technology is their worst enemy." She smiled slightly. "Officer Bennett thought he could come to my home and scare me. He didn't know my doorbell was watching, recording, saving evidence. And that evidence sent him to prison for 17 years. The reporter asked if she'd been afraid that night when Bennett stood on her porch, threatening her. Richardson paused, considered. "In the moment, yes, he was drunk, aggressive, armed. I didn't know what he might do. But I also knew I couldn't let fear control me. I'm a judge. My job is to uphold the law, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous. If I had backed down, if I had dropped his case out of fear, what message would that send? That judges can be intimidated? That corrupt cops can threaten their way out of accountability? No, that's not how justice works. Bennett made a choice to threaten me, and I made a choice to hold him accountable. The doorbell camera just made sure there was no doubt about what happened." The interview went viral. Judge Richardson became a symbol of courage, of integrity, of refusing to be intimidated. Schools invited her to speak. Law enforcement academies used her case in training. She became a voice for judicial independence and the importance of accountability. And every speech, every interview, she mentioned the same thing. Invest in a doorbell camera. You never know when you might need evidence of what happens at your door. As for Bennett, he's currently in federal prison, year 3 of his 17-year sentence. No appeals succeeded, no early release granted. He works in the prison laundry, earns 40 cents an hour, keeps his head down. Other inmates know he's a former cop. That makes him a target. He's been attacked twice, spends most of his time in protective custody. 14 more years, that's what he has left. 14 years to think about the doorbell camera, the decision to threaten a judge,
the arrogance that destroyed his life. Judge Richardson still lives in the same house, still has the same doorbell camera. She's received threats since the Bennett case, angry letters, anonymous calls, but she's not scared, not intimidated, because she knows every threat is being recorded, every visitor is on camera, every attempt at intimidation is evidence, and she's proven she'll use that evidence. The lesson from this case is simple. Technology has changed the game. Cameras are everywhere, recording everything. If you're a cop who thinks you can abuse power without consequences, think again. If you're a criminal who thinks you can intimidate witnesses, think again. If you're anyone who believes you can threaten, harm, or corrupt without being caught, think again. Because somewhere, somehow, you're being recorded, and that footage will end you. Officer Marcus Bennett learned that lesson the hard way. 17 years hard.